Red paint is the most expensive paint color. Why is that? In fact, what makes any paint more or less expensive than the rest? Well, this can of paint right here costs $200 a gallon, and this can costs $2,000 a gallon. How can that be? These colors to the naked eye are pretty much the same. So what's in this can that makes it 10 times more than this can? Well, to answer that, we're gonna pick apart the chemistry of paint, look at a secret ingredient that makes certain paint so costly, and figure out what color is really the most expensive. The answer is pretty surprising. Thanks to our friends at ModFind for sponsoring today's episode of Bumper to Bumper. I've got a lot of cars and I've got a lot of bikes, so I'm always on the hunt for some new shiny parts. Isn't that right, baby? Yeah, I know you like to be spoiled with new parts. What's that? Oh no, you're the best. Oh, you wait till I get home, I'm gonna give you a bath. Oh, sorry. Well, when I'm looking for some specific parts, or even if I have some laying around that I need to sell, I always check out ModFind. ModFind is an automotive marketplace connecting enthusiasts around the world to parts and cars that they're looking for. And what's even cooler, they have a kickback program where you can make some extra cash. It's easy. All you got to do is connect your ModFind account to your social media account and promote your friend's listing. When they go and sell it, you get a kickback of the profit. Easy way to make some dough, baby. So head on over to modfind.com or click the link in the description to download the app and start buying or selling parts today. Now let's get back to some B2B, baby. So to answer our question, we need to know the basic chemical makeup in the average can of paint. And the main components inside paint we're going to talk about today are the binders, the solvents, the fillers, and the pigments. So what do each of those do exactly? Well, a binder is exactly what it sounds like. It's a resin that gives the paint adhesive properties, allowing it to bind to the car's surface. And it basically is what makes the paint dry into a thin film after being sprayed onto the car. Then you have your solvent, which is used to keep the paint in liquid form until it's sprayed onto the car. Now, water-based paints, they still have a bit of solvent in them, albeit much smaller amount than solvent-based paints. Now, fillers are white or slightly colored powders of cheap natural minerals like talc, gypsum, or chalk. And most cheap paints have a lot of filler in them. Finally, we have the pigments, and they're typically a granular or powdery substance that gives the paint its color. Pigments can be natural or artificial oxides, metal salts, metal powders, as well as organic pigments for brighter colors. Now, if the paint needed to be of higher quality, each of these basic ingredients would be made from a higher quality material. For example, binders in a higher quality paint usually are resins that are urethane based rather than acrylic based because they're more durable and chip resistant. Now, in the auto world, there are two main types of paint: solvent-based paints and water-based paints. And regardless of which one we're talking about, they share many of the same ingredients. Now, our $200 paint here has a higher percentage of filler in it. The filming agent is cheaper, so it'll probably degrade faster, and the pigment will fade quicker. It also has a solvent-based paint, which is cheaper to produce. Now, up until the early 2000s, nearly all car manufacturers were using solvent-based paints. Today, it's the complete opposite. Nearly all new paint jobs are using water-based paints. So why are the paint companies switching to water-based paints even though it's more expensive to produce? Water-based paints contain less VOCs. Those are called volatile organic compounds. Paints with higher VOCs were known to have these strong smells that kind of pretty much got you high.
And so when you work with them, they're pretty dangerous.
And aside from the solvent content dropping, water-based paints are actually more durable. Now, another advantage of water-based paints includes they're easier for color matching, which is especially important during refinishing and blending applications. And also, they have more vivid and cleaner hues than solvent-based paints. And all these upgrades in the paint meant that water-based paints cost on average 55 cents more per ounce. Now, a gallon of paint, that's 128 ounces. So switching from solvent to water-based paint means an increase in cost of about $70. But we have an increase in cost of about tenfold. So what's going on with these two that make them so different? Well, we're gonna get to that. Now, water-based paints, they're nice and all, but they do create some trouble. This never-ending quest by car companies has advanced so far in recent years, resulting in so many different shades and finishes. There are just too many colors being made now, so paint shops have needed to get very scientific when figuring out what the exact shade a car is. So to remedy this, paint shops have started using spectrometers. Welcome to Jerry's Spectrometer Shop. We got spectrometers of all kinds. We got IR spectrometers. Do you know how much one of these things costs? Probably not, but we're slashing prices. Come on down. We'll give you a good deal. So in body shops that are doing lots of paint repair, in order to color match the paint as best as possible, they use a type of spectrometer called a spectrophotometer. So they take a spectrophotometer, they slap it up against the car, and it takes a reading. Some of that light will be absorbed by the paint, and the rest will bounce off. Well, the part that bounces off, it strikes a detector inside that spectrophotometer, and it senses what light is being transmitted and then converts that into a color code and therefore a paint code. So that's pretty cool if you're interested in matching a very specific paint, but it doesn't tell you all that much on a chemical level. So I took some samples of our expensive and our cheap paint here, and I had them sent off to be analyzed by energy dispersive X-ray spectroscopy, meaning it can tell us what inorganic elements on the periodic table are inside the paint. So the X-axis represents energy and the Y-axis represents the number of counts. So when we compare our two paints, we can see the expensive paint has sodium, magnesium, sulfur, barium, and copper. This method not only tells us what elements are in the sample, but how much of each element. You can see right here in the cheap paint, we have 2.11% aluminum, while the expensive paint, we have 3.14% aluminum. The higher the peak, the bigger the count, the more that element is inside your sample. So we just talked about a bunch of paint chemistry. Well, that's all great and all, but I want to know what makes this stuff expensive. Where the paint really gets costly is in the pigments that's used. Now, pigments are finely ground solid particles that are mixed into liquid solutions that give most plastic inks and paints their color. Now, white is usually made from titanium dioxide and black is sourced from carbon. Now, red is usually the most expensive basic color because it's made of an organic compound and comes from red ochre, a natural clay earth pigment that gets its red tint from a mineral called hematite, which is Fe2O3 for my chemistry boys, and that is dehydrated iron oxide. The need to mine this clay is what makes red an inherently expensive color, which adds a pricey stop in the manufacturing process. So when car brands need to make a special paint color, the production process can be very complex and as a result be quite expensive to produce. For example, Lexus has a color called structural blue, and that actually has no blue pigment in it at all. It was inspired by the American Morpho butterfly because its wings look like they're blue, except it doesn't have any blue on its wings. Instead, the color blue, as seen by the human eye, is created by a light interference on the microscopic lattice surface structure of the butterfly's wings. Lexus wanted to emulate that effect, so they took colorless particles of aluminum and zinc sulfide and vacuum coated them in multiple layers onto a film. The multi-layer process that Lexus uses on the particles is what reflects the visible light to create a jewel-like blue color. This then goes through a 12-step production process that involves stripping the multi-layer structure from the film, drying it, grounding it into flakes, and then heat treating it. And after all of this, Lexus now has the desired pigment for their structural blue paint. Now, the final product allows the car to cast detailed shadows of the body in broad daylight, but also appear as if it was glowing blue at night. Now, I know I just quickly explained that whole entire process, but it took Lexus 15 years to refine that process to achieve its final paint product. Now let's take a look at this $2,000 a gallon paint right here. This is from a paint company called Glazerite. The paint code is 3R7, also known as silver liquid metal paint, and it's used on the Porsche 918 Spider. And this paint costs a lot of money for two main reasons. The first is that it's from the Glazerite 90 line. This is the highest tier paint offered by the company, meaning all the ingredients are top shelf. If we're talking soda analogies, it's like Dr. Pepper. And the cheaper paints, they're like Professor Pepper. Professor Pepper, we have 24 flavors. Now, the second reason is because of their special pearl toner used to make the silver pigment super reflective. Now, the pearl toner is made of finely ground flakes made from natural iridescent mica, which are coated in metal oxides. And what is really crazy is that this paint is just one part of a multi-step process that ends up costing you $64,000. So in the simplest terms, this paint is worth $2,000 because it uses higher quality materials than this regular old $200 one. Is $2,000 worth it for a gallon of pretty much basically silver paint? I have half a pint here. We didn't buy a full gallon because we didn't have $2,000 to spend on it, but we spent about $150 on half a pint. I have this extra paint and we don't know what to do with it. We sent it off for some analysis. We have some more. What do you think we should paint with it? Thank you guys for watching. Follow us on Instagram at Donut Media. Follow me at Jeremiah Burton. Till next week. Bye for now.